fire the next morning and was buried on the bank of the Green River, his coffin hastily dug out of the trunk of a tree.
Fatherless, the Sagers pushed on. At last, they crossed the border into the Oregon country. But on the dusty trail along the Snake River, Naomi, too, became delirious with fever.
We traveled over a very rough road, and she moaned pitifully all day. When we camped for the night, her pulse was nearly gone. She lived but a few moments more, and her last words were, "Oh, Henry, if you only knew how we have suffered."
The children buried their mother wrapped in a bedsheet in a shallow grave along the trail, with willow brush and a wooden headboard to mark the spot.
The teams were then hitched to the wagon, and the train drove on, leaving her to her long sleep. Thus, in 26 days, both our parents were laid in the grave, and we were orphans. The oldest 14 years old, and the youngest 5 months old.
And there were these 7 children left without any relatives in the world. The word orphan is almost insufficient to describe their situation. And, of course, the other thing to remember about them is that there was no one in the West waiting for them. So these children were just alone.
It was now late September, and the first snows were falling in the mountains. Under the care of other families in the wagon train, the 7 Sager children pressed on. In early October, they reached Cayuse country. One member of the caravan rode ahead to the mission run by Marcus and Narcissa Whitman to tell them that a needy wagon train was approaching and to talk with them about adopting the Sager children.
Application has been made for us to take an orphan family of 7 children, as they have not a relative in the company. What we shall do, I cannot say. We cannot see them suffer if the Lord casts them upon us. Narcissa Whitman.
Since her own daughter's death, to ease her grief, Narcissa had taken in 4 other children, including the daughter of the mountain man, Joe Meek.
For Narcissa, the death of her daughter Alice was the beginning of a real collapse, a physical and a psychological breakdown. And then when the Sager children arrive, it's really her salvation. She can recreate a very satisfying domestic life and really turn her back on the real mission work that she came out to do.
Husband thought we could get along with all but the baby. He did not see how we could take that. But I felt that if I must take any, I wanted her, as a charm to bind the rest to me.
The Whitmans sent word back to the wagon train that they would take all 7. A few days later, after 6 months and 2,000 miles, Henry and Naomi Sager's children finally reached their new home in Oregon. Narcissa Whitman came out to meet them for the first time.
She was a large, well-formed woman, fair-complexioned, with beautiful auburn hair, nose rather large, and large gray eyes. She had on a dark calico dress and a gingham sunbonnet. We thought, as we shyly looked at her, that she was the prettiest woman we had ever seen.
Americans started moving west for all these individual personal reasons. Land, converting Indians, furs. But everywhere they went, the end result was they wanted to make it into the United States. Didn't matter why they went. Once they got there, they decided this place should be part of the United States. And in doing so, they brought the nation with them. The nation didn't send them out. They brought the United States with them.
The Californios inhabit a country embracing 400 or 500 miles of seacoast with several harbors. With fine forests in the north, the waters filled with fish, and the plains covered with thousands of herds of cattle. Blessed with a climate than which there can be no better in the world. In the hands of an enterprising people, what a country this might be. Richard Henry Dana.
By the mid-1840s, lured by reports of fertile soil and a healthy climate, some 3,000 American settlers had filed through the Sierra Nevada mountains and down into California's Sacramento Valley. The commander of all Mexican troops in Northern California, Mariano Guadalupe Vallejo, begged Mexico City for the soldiers he knew would be necessary to keep the Americans out. Vallejo belonged to one of the oldest Spanish families in the Americas. Most of the Sonoma Valley, 250,000 acres, belonged to him. But despite his position, the government ignored his pleas for troops. It seemed to Vallejo and his fellow Californios that Mexico City was as distant and arbitrary as it had been to the people of Texas. He now found himself embroiled in revolts and counter-revolts, and increasing calls for California's independence. Finally, the leading Californios gathered in Monterey to discuss their future. One man favored annexation by France, since it was a Catholic country. Another thought California should join the British Empire. Still others called for a Republic of California. Vallejo had come to a different conclusion.
To rely any longer upon Mexico to govern and defend us would be idle and absurd. Why should we shrink from incorporating ourselves with the United States, the happiest and freest nation in the world, destined soon to be the most wealthy and powerful? When we join our fortunes to hers, we shall not become subjects, but fellow citizens. Mariano Guadalupe Vallejo.
The people of Texas have, with a unanimity unparalleled, declared that they will be reunited to the great Republican family of the North. We are cheered by the hope that they will receive us and hail us welcome into the great family of free men. Sam Houston, President, Republic of Texas.
Sam Houston had always assumed that Texas would become a state within a few months of his victory at San Jacinto. But for 7 years, Congress refused to grant statehood to Texas. The northern states feared its admission would tip the precarious balance of power toward the slave states. Then in 1844, James Knox Polk was narrowly elected president. He was a humorless, hard-working Democrat from Tennessee, utterly determined to expand the United States. With his support, and a compromise deftly sidestepping the issue of slavery, the Republic of Texas became the 38th state in the Union. Sam Houston was named its first senator. President Polk now turned his attention to the Pacific Northwest. He threatened Britain with war unless